Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience Podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions.
And so I did my AIT and did all right there too. So by the time I got out of AIT, I was a PFC already.
What's
I'd
AIT?
Advanced individual training.
Okay.
So I did my basics, and I did my AIT, which is just basically more of basic.
Right. Another step of
And
basic, yeah.
and so I jumped 2 pay grades, and I was on the next plane to Southeast Asia.
Yeah. So how long were you there?
In Southeast Asia,
Mhm.
37 days.
Wow. And why were you there 37 days?
I got med flighted out.
So you got hurt.
My first firefight.
Okay. So they life flight you out. So they med flight you out, right?
Right. Yeah, they med flighted me to Seoul, and then from Seoul they sent me back to Seattle to Madigan
Wow.
General. And
All places, right?
yeah. So I did my rehab right back at Fort Lewis.
Oh my gosh.
I'd only been gone for a month.
Yeah, like a big circle.
Yeah.
So once you do your rehab, what happens?
Well, they gave me a test, and they said that I had already made PFC. I'd only been in, I'd only been in for like 6 months,
Right.
and it was already PFC. I was up for corporal, and I had some medals by then, and so they sent me to Chicago so I could work at the recruiting station
There you go.
where I'd gone in through the intake station.
Oh, I love it.
But I only did that for about I didn't even make 6 weeks there because they caught me trying to talk people out of coming in instead of being recruited, and they
Whoops.
thought I probably would serve them better if I was in a different place.
Probably.
So they
Especially
sent
if
me
you were trying to talk them out of it. So
right.
here's how you light the flame on the draft card, right? Yeah, that's just, that doesn't work usually when you're in the recruiting department.
Well, just you're really serious about run away. Just run away.
You've lost your mind.
What is the matter with you?
That's right. That's right. You need to check yourself. All right. So they reassign you. Where do you get reassigned?
I think I got sent to Germany.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. And the nice thing about it was I was in an ordnance group, and but it was the Vietnam War was starting to ratchet down.
Oh, there you
And they had all these guys that were basically 11 Bravo. They were
Mhm.
infantry, and they didn't have any special skills or anything like that the Army could use. And so they had no jobs for us.
Right.
And so when I got to the duty station, they said, "Can you drive a truck?" And I said, "I can drive anything."
Mm-hmm.
And so I spent the next 18 months driving a 10-ton wrecker and doing rescue and evac and doing all kinds of errand running and things like that. It was pretty good duty. I
In
got to see
Germany.
most. I got to see most of Europe.
Yeah, there you go.
And The first day I went out, this is actually a kind of a funny story, if you don't mind. The first the first run that I made, I was supposed to take a semi-tractor trailer with tank engines that they were recycling to the depot, which is over on the French frontier, and take it and bring it back. And so I got in it. I had never driven a semi before, and they had it all hooked up, and off I went, and I drove for about 2 hours, 2.5, 3 hours, and the thing died on me right along the side of the Autobahn. And I couldn't figure out what the hell was wrong with it, and it wouldn't go. And I didn't speak German, and I didn't have a phone. They didn't have phones back then.
Right.
So I just sat in the truck, and that was the morning. By the evening, this guy showed up with a wrecker and another tractor. And he said that I'd been reported as down, and it was a priority thing, so they were bringing me another tractor. So he unhooked it and hooked the new one up for me and everything else, and off I went again. And I got to the depot and got stuff and turned around, started heading back, and the thing quit on me again.
Different tractor.
And the tractor quit. Pulled off to the side of the road, and these great big army trucks, noisy as hell. And I sat there the rest of the night and most of the next morning. Pretty soon, here come the wrecker, and here come another tractor, and it was the same guy.
Wow.
And he had brought me sandwiches the first time, and food and coffee.
Wow.
He didn't have sandwiches, food, or coffee this time.
Yeah.
In fact, he had a pretty bad case of
Oh, no.
And he said, I'll tell you what, this one better not be out of gas like the last one was.
Oh, no, you're kidding.
And I said, well, I switched the tanks on it because it's got twin tanks,
right.
And I said, I switched it, and it said that the tank was full. He said, you switched it on the dashboard, but you got to turn the valve under the seat. Well, nobody told me about valves under the seat.
Right.
So I knew the tractor that I was in was out of gas too.
Right.
Because I hadn't turned the thing.
Oh,
so this time he didn't bring me any food. He didn't hook it up for me or anything else.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how to hook the air up on the brakes or anything like that. So I did the best I could. Well, I got into the mountains around Kaiserslautern or around Würzburg.
Yeah.
And cars started going by and waving at me and everything else. I looked in the rearview mirror. The whole back end of the trailer was on fire.
Oh my gosh.
And because I had hooked the brake hoses backwards.
Right.
And so the brakes were on.
Yeah.
So they'd overheated the whole time. I thought it was pulling like a dog. I thought it was a really crappy tractor.
Hey, it sounds like it's straining.
Yeah, well, it was. So I jumped out, and sure enough, the brake linings were on fire, and pretty soon they ran out and caught the tires on fire. And it was a wooden trailer. So the trailer caught fire. The trouble is my fire extinguisher and all of that stuff were in the first tractor.
Sure they were.
Not the third tractor.
Right.
So I unhooked them. I unhooked the tractor and pulled it out of the way. And then I sat and watched those tank engines fall through the floor of the trailer.
Oh my
and so the German fire department came and put it out. And pretty soon here come the guy.
Same guy?
Same guy.
Did he have sandwiches and coffee?
No, he sure didn't. And he was really not in a good mood.
Yeah, you were very popular with him at that point.
And he made me drag that trailer on the steel rims all the way back to the nearest base.
Oh no.
in the middle of the night. And when I got back to where I was supposed to be, no tank engines, no trailer,
Right.
no nothing. They put me on the wrecker cruise, and then for the next 18 months, I had to work with that guy.
Oh, you're kidding me. Oh, he was super happy.
Oh, we got to be better friends
Oh,
after a
sure.
while.
Eventually, yeah.
Yeah, because for every thing I did, there was somebody else that was willing to top it.
That's it. I cannot imagine how much patience you have to be that guy,
Yeah.
right?
Well, it was the weekend too. I forgot to tell you that. It was
Yeah.
Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah.
So
So he
he
was
didn't even get his
particularly
weekend.
happy with you. Yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That is a funny story. You're right. Okay. So how much time? So you spend your time in Germany. At some point, do you leave Germany or what happens?
Well, I eventually rotated out.
Okay.
I only had 2 years in. I probably could have gotten out when I came back to Madigan, but because I had 4 months of what they called bad time for being AWOL, I
Yeah.
couldn't I couldn't get out. I had to serve my time.
Gotcha.
So I served my 2 years, and then I served the extra 4 months too. But then I came home.
And that was in Germany.
Right.
Right. And so you finished in Germany and then you came home and you were done with the service?
Right. Exactly.
Where'd you go next?
Unfortunately, I'd gotten in a little trouble right at the end, and so I got uh, I had to do some probationary um, reporting and things like that. I had to keep my nose clean for 5 years after I got out.
Okay.
And so I had to keep a job. I had to do all of that. Basically, parole. I was on parole.
Yeah. So what did you do after you got out of the service?
I went to school, I went back and became a machinist. I took an apprenticeship as a machinist and worked in the machine shop and learned drafting, went to school for that, learned drafting, and uh, tried to stay out of trouble for the most part. And eventually went back to school and became a physician.
Really?
Yeah.
You went back to school and became a doctor,
Yes, sir.
medical
Yeah,
doctor.
I practiced for 40 years.
Oh my gosh, that's cool.
Yeah.
So where did you practice?
All over. I practiced 20 some years in Wisconsin,
Okay.
in Toma, Wisconsin. And then I took a job as the assistant director at the University of Iowa in Iowa. And I did that for a few years. Didn't like it. An awful lot of politics in secondary education, and an awful lot of people that can't find with a flashlight,
Right.
and that you answer to. And so I quit that and I went back into practice, and I practiced in Northern Illinois for the rest of my time.
So what was your favorite thing about being a medical doctor?
The house calls,
Why?
because you never knew what you were going to walk into. I
Isn't that the
practiced
truth?
in Wisconsin. I practiced in an Amish community, and
Ooh,
so 3 days a week, I was on the road
yeah,
doing what we called buggy calls.
yeah.
And so you would walk in. Sometimes you'd walk in and there'd be somebody that was in the last stages of labor,
Hmm.
and you'd have to deliver the baby, or there'd be somebody that had broken a bone or had an axe wound, or all manner of odd things that you could never count on.
Mhm.
or anything else. So you had to have a pretty good sized bag of tricks,
Mhm.
and you had to be able to depend on yourself.
Yeah. So it's never the same.
It was never the same. I
It's
wrote a
always
book
different.
about that too.
What's that?
I wrote a book about that too.
That's awesome. So what's the first book called?
It's called Bless Me, Father.
Okay. And then the
And
second book?
the second book is called For I Have Sinned.
Okay.
And when I got out of the service for a little while, I was kind of lost. Um, After the Vietnam War, when the soldiers came home, we didn't get welcomed home
No, it's
like
true.
everybody else did.
It's true.
And World War II guys, they were welcomed home. Korean War guys, they were welcome home.
Yeah.
I walked through the airport coming home, and people threw things at me, called me a baby killer, you know, yelled obscenities and everything else. And I had a police escort walking through
Wow.
the airport, and because I was technically still under arrest,
Mhm.
and they still did it. And so for a while, when I got home, I was a little bit lost, and I was willing to believe some of the worst things about my own character.
Yeah.
And so I spent some time operating on the wrong side of the law. And I took jobs that I shouldn't have taken, and I did things that I shouldn't have done. And I got myself between a rock and a hard place eventually.
Mhm.
Um, I I got it in between the law and some criminal elements,
Mhm.
and I had no way out. Didn't know what to do about it. I was pretty stuck. I was going to go down, and I didn't know who to call, so I called my dad,
Mhm.
and my dad became my hero. He came to my rescue. And so the second book I wrote, For I Have Sinned, is about his uh, history.
Mhm.
He was a tail gunner on a B-17 bomber during World War II.
Mhm.
And the life expectancy of a tail gunner was 5 missions. I looked it
Wow.
up, I studied it. He flew 26.
Wow.
And so he was his own man.
Yeah.
And he didn't, he didn't say 5 words where two would do. He didn't have friends. And just before he would never talk about the war.
Mhm.
Would never talk about any of that stuff. And then when he was starting to descend into dementia, he gave me his diary.
Hmm.
And it was a diary he had kept of every mission that he flew.
Wow.
And it's just hair raising, awful stuff. Came in on a dead stick, landing gear wouldn't go down, lost both waist gunners and the navigator. We go
Mhm.
again tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so I took those excerpts from his diary and I wove them into the story of the second book
Right.
of where he came from and what he was doing. And then the two of us getting out of trouble at the end of the book. And then the third one is called The Heretic, and it's about house calls.
Wow. That is so cool. So let me ask you this. What's the most important thing that you learned writing those three books?
Well, for one thing, it was cathartic.
Yeah, I can
um,
imagine.
I had spent a lot of time thinking back about the things that I had done and the things that I had seen, and in a way feeling kind of guilty about all of it,
Mhm.
and my relationship with my father in particular, and all of that stuff. And by writing it out, it coalesced into a better understanding of life. And
Mhm.
to be honest with you, um, but also that there are more than one way to look at
Mhm.
everything. And if you miss the lesson, then you miss the point altogether.
Yeah.
and life is all about the lessons,
Yeah.
and whether or not are you as dumb as a box of rocks at the end of the journey as you were when you started, or did you learn anything at all?
Yeah. Wow. That is really cool. You learned a lot.
Well, I did a lot of things. I don't
Yeah.
know how much I learned.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like writing about it helped you to learn some of it, and you gained some perspective from it.
Yeah, and well, and the truth is that some of that stuff, um, what my dad used to call DAS. um, you do some of that DAS,
Yeah.
and you don't think much about it except you feel bad
Yeah.
or something like that, and then you go back and you realize, hey, there's a pretty good story here,
Mhm.
and you can tell it as a pretty good story,
Yeah.
and you can cast yourself as the hero,
Yeah.
and 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 then you don't feel quite so bad about yourself.
There you go. I love it. So what's the future hold?
Well, those 3 books have now become 6,
My
and
goodness, really?
and there's I got I got one that I've told the publisher I'll have done by the 1st of June,
Okay.
and it's a different thing. I wrote those 3, and they're basically about me,
Yeah.
although I wrote them so that they would be a good story.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of fiction in it, and
Mhm.
that sort of thing, but they're good stories,
Yeah.
and the reviews are good, so I'm happy with them.
Yeah.
But then I was done writing. Like I said, it was cathartic, man. I When I was done with those, I was done.
Mhm.
I was a terrible student. I flunked English, like I
Mhm.
told you,
Yeah.
and I didn't want to write anything or anything like that. But um, I was having a little trouble breathing. I have a really bad set of lungs.
Mhm.
I was well, I was in a helicopter crash, and it burned, and I sucked some of the fire into my lungs.
Mhm.
Um, this was in Germany. This wasn't in Vietnam, but we went down, and so my lungs are kind of shot, and I've been having some trouble breathing. And I went in to the VA, and they said, you need to call your family right now. Um, and so I had a quadruple bypass surgery
Mhm.
within hours,
Wow.
and I was immediately retired.
Mhm.
Between my lungs and my heart, I couldn't practice anymore.
Yeah.
And so I sat down and I thought, well, now if you're going to write about this stuff, now's the time to do it.
Yeah. No
So
kidding.
what I really was trying to do was duplicate what my dad did with his diary. I
Mhm.
just wanted to write these stories because um, I didn't get married until I was almost 35.
Mhm.
I didn't have kids until I was in my late 30s, early 40s. And so I'd had a lot of life under my belt before I met my kids.
Right.
And so I wanted to write some of those stories so that they might understand why I was such a weird SOB. And one story became another, and then it became another. And the next thing you knew, it turned into 3 novels.
Wow.
But I was done. I
Yeah.
was really done. I didn't want to write anymore. I had told my story,
Mhm.
and the point was to tell the story.
Mhm.
And my daughter said, "No, Dad, you gotta write some more. You're really good at it."
Mhm.
And I said, "Well, what am I going to write about?"
Mhm.
She said, "Write about us." I said, "Well, what do you mean?" She said, "Look," and this is true.
Mhm.
Every year since she's my tail ender. I didn't have her until I was 52,
Mhm.
and uh, so every year from the time that she was like 8, something like that, I would take her out of school for 2 weeks,
Mhm.
and we would go on an adventure
Mhm.
someplace. It was supposed to be educational, but it was also supposed to be fun and exciting. So we went down to the Keys and rescued sea turtles, and we went out to Big Sur in California and watched the sea lions or the elephant seals, and went to Memphis, and we went to the Apostle Islands, and went and dove the shipwrecks, and counted bears on the islands, and things like, always something exciting, always something educational for her to do and see. And she said, tell those stories. And I said, well, that sounds like a travel log. How boring is that? And she said, well, make it into a treasure hunt. Make it a something like that. And I said, oh yeah, sure, like fantasy. Like, should I bring in witches and druids and elves and fairies? And she said, absolutely.
Wow.
And so the next two books and the third one on its way are fantasy stories about a young girl who doesn't realize she's a witch until she turns 14, and then she gets all her powers.
Wow.
So those fantasies are hers and mine. And now the last one, the seventh one, is coming along too, and that's a different story altogether.
Yeah. Wow.
That's what's new these days.
That's incredible. That's incredible. Well, I'm super excited for you. I am so glad that we had an opportunity to talk and to get to know you better. And I cannot thank you enough for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. It's been a lot of fun.
Well, thanks, Mike. I appreciate your patience.
No, I thoroughly enjoyed every second of it. Thanks again, man.
Okay.
We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.